Hello and welcome to the public meeting of the DC Lodge. And as always, I'll start with Annie Besant's invocation, and then I will introduce today's speaker, and then we all look forward to his presentation. So I would invite you to join me. Make sure you're muted, but if we all read it loud, then the vibrations will be stronger. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. So today we are going to have a presentation by Ed Moskowitz. He has a PhD in biophysics. He worked at Bell Labs as a programmer, systems engineer, and supervisor until his retirement. He's a founding member of the Wheaton-Olcott Lodge and serves as its treasurer. And for the past 12 years, he has facilitated a non-duality study group, first at national headquarters and now within a private group. So please help me to welcome Ed. And it's going to be a special and different lecture. I would like to ask you, if you don't mind, we have realized that some people have windows where the chats pop up. So if you could just hold off with the chat contributions until the end of the lecture, and then I'll be happy to ask to read any of the questions or comments that are in there. And with that, the floor is yours, Ed. Go ahead.
So thank you everyone for coming. And so the title of the talk is Experiential Investigation of the 7 Principles of Man. And I'll go over the 7 principles briefly, but mainly they're going to serve as a map to our experiences. And in preparation of the first experience, I need you all to go to your kitchen and get a cookie or something that you could taste. You know, a piece of fruit, something that you can put in your mouth and taste. And I'll wait a minute.
Is chocolate permissible?
Sure.
Okay, I am back. I have something that I can taste. Thank you.
Ed, you didn't have to ask me to do that twice. I ran to the kitchen.
But you have to wait to taste it now, Adria. Okay. So I am, because he's going to go through all the things. Okay. Okay, Ed, whenever you're ready. I think most people don't have it too far. And I hope most people have something. So if you just joined in, make sure you get something to from the kitchen to taste.
Yeah, if we were live, I would be handing out fortune cookies. But so everyone has to have their own. Okay, so on your screen, you should see the 7 principles of man. And let me briefly go through them. But before I do that, you notice that the normal representation is sort of a vertical stack, in which, we're in the lower and we want to get
You
to the
have some
higher.
background noise. I'm very sorry. Some cracking, just once in a while. I don't know if it's a movement or something.
It could be my microphone.
Okay, I don't know. I'm
Is
not.
it okay now?
It is okay now.
Okay. So it's a stack where we're trying to get to the higher and we're down in the lower. And so I want to give you a different representation where all the principles are on equal footing, and they're all operating all the time. And it's sort of where we put our attention about which principle we notice, but they're all operating. And the seventh principle, called Atma or spirit, really doesn't belong to us. More, it's the basis for all the other principles, and it's tied to the universal. So it isn't a personal principle at all. It is the universal within us. So just going over from right to left, as you read Hebrew, we start out with the physical body, the dense physical body. You think we understand? Yeah.
I just sometimes I don't know what it is, but it comes in really crackling. So I don't know if you move something because it's not all the time.
It's like a shuffling of cards.
I thought he was unwrapping his fortune cookie all this time.
Yeah, that could be it too.
That's what it sounds like.
Okay.
Well, good. You're already zooming into the senses, which is what our experiment is. Okay, so then we have the etheric double, which is sort of shadows the physical body and all the cells and molecules of the physical body, and is the principle that basically has the intelligence to tell the physical body what shape it should take. And is also the connecting principle from the next principle, prana, which is the vital energy. So it's the conduit to the vital energy to the physical body. And then prana, like I said, is the vital principle, the energy that we call aliveness. And then we have the desire body, the so-called desire body. The Sanskrit word is kama, and it's your emotional feeling level, and it's associated with part of the next principle, manas, mind, and together they form what is often known as kama manas, which is the thinking, feeling principle, from which you are participating in right now by listening to me and thinking about things, and at the same time evaluating them both on a rational and irrational emotional level. And it's the primary lens through which most of us view the rest of the world and the rest of the principles during the waking state mainly, but also in the dream state. And then we have the buddhi principle. Conceptually, it's often called the wisdom or intuitive level, and it's completely opaque to the common monist viewpoint. And so it's very vague to conceptually what it is. So we have a placeholder for this principle, and I hope to give you some. On the other hand, we do experience it all the time, like all the other principles. We just don't experience it through our normal thinking, feeling way of experiencing it. And then Atma, as I said, was this universal principle. The basis, it's associated with the absolute, the indefinable, like we talked about, the indefinable basis of reality in which we have our being, in which we have our reality. And again, from the common monist point of view, it's just a vague notion. Really can't say very much about it, except in terms of negative concepts, not finite, not bounded, neither this nor that. To give the common monist a bone to hang its hat on. On the other hand, again, with everything else, we experience it all the time, but just not through our normal lens of common monist. So that's just a very brief overview. And if you've never heard these principles before, I'm sure there are lots of questions, none of which I'm going to answer during this talk, because the answers we normally want is on the level of ideas. And what I hope to do during this talk is to emphasize an experience that's beyond ideas. So to start off, let's talk about the physical. And for this, we're going to make use of the piece of food that you got. I'm going to open up my fortune cookie. And I'm going to point you to the way we experience the physical is through our senses, our five senses. But also mainly through the lens of our ideas about the senses. So I want to try to separate out the ideas from the pure sensory experience. So looking at your piece of food, it has a shape, and the shape is defined by colors. And so you can notice the color and the shape of this object, and also notice that when we're noticing the colors and shape, it doesn't have just one color. It has a variety of colors. And noticing the light shining off the thing, there's some of the colors are darker, some are lighter. There's a gradient. So feeling your way into this seeing experience, you also can notice that this object that you're noticing is surrounded by a background. You never see an object isolated by itself. You always see it surrounded by sometimes definable and sometimes indefinable colors and shapes and and of that nature. And we, through our attention, we pluck out from the background this particular object. And so that's the feeling of seeing. Now, also notice while you're seeing and noticing the object, that the seeing has a characteristic of its own that you can distinguish from other senses. So when I say, look at something, you know what I'm talking about. You know what to do. You know what the feeling of seeing is, and you immediately go there. So just notice that the seeing has a certain taste to it also. Now you're also feeling it. So you're dealing with the sense of touch, which also has a distinct type of knowing, and you could feel the texture of it. You could notice different features of the feeling of this object. And again, it's not isolated to the whole feeling world. You're also feeling, the bottom of your legs on the chair, and you're feeling the insides of your body and the outsides of your body. And from this whole feeling world, again, we've selected a certain feeling. So now let's taste this. Maybe before we taste it, we could smell it a little bit. There's a sense of smell, not very prominent in me, and this particular thing doesn't smell, and yet it's recognizable. I know it's not a lot of other smells. And again, the world of smell, we're surrounded by smells, and we could focus on a particular smell. And unless you're in the perfume industry or the flower industry, you probably don't have much of a vocabulary for what you're smelling. But this again, smell has a certain feeling to it that is distinct from seeing and hearing, and we know immediately what it is. And so we taste it. And while we're tasting it, we're also feeling it in our mouth and the tongue. And then we notice the taste. And and again, unless you're a chef or something, you probably don't have much of a vocabulary for what you're tasting. And yet it's noticeable and it's variable. And the more you pay attention to it, the more it blooms into specifics and generalities, and it brings back memories, and you can identify it. And again, it's surrounded by other tastes that we don't pay attention to. So I think, and then there's the texture, and there's the movement, and there's the temperature of the object that you can also pay attention to. And if it doesn't, again, you're surrounded by temperature and texture, and you could focus your attention and pull out of the background this particular thing. So this is the sensation of the physical world. And this is how we know the physical world. And it's through these sensations, these variable sensations, that we start labeling and identifying things. And then we stop paying attention to the actual sensation and just focus on our ideas. And we miss the dynamic nature of the physical world. And we miss its changeable nature in favor of our ideas of it. So we have a visual idea of our physical body based on maybe a distance of a foot to 10 feet. And so when we imagine our physical body, and it's in terms of that range of distance. So I'm going to show you a video that shows you from who you are at different distances and different magnifications. I hope this works. Okay. I can. Did it stop? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to pause now. And does anybody have any comments or?
Don't you like technology, Ed?
Sometimes.
Yes, very useful. Thank you.
Very,
So
very
yeah.
impressive. Nothing to add. I mean, it's just such an incredible experience and puts things into perspective. That's, I mean, really does put things into perspective.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to add, Suzanne want to understand that as I'm studying Gebser, and in terms of perspective, I think this is a good visual of the perspective.
So
Adrian, go ahead. Adrian wanted to say something and then Desiree.
It's very brief, and what I wanted to say, and I did get my cookie, and then Susan told me I couldn't eat my cookie. I was holding my cookie and I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And I was realizing all the things around, as you said, but I was also realizing my inner anxiety. I had so many feelings. I was getting mad. I said, here I am holding my cookie. I want to eat my cookie. I can't eat my cookie. I was getting anxious about my cookie. So I wanted to express that the interior world was looming very large with me as well. And I wanted to know if you want to address something about not only the uncertainties that we have, but you were saying this was about ideas. I noticed I had a flood of emotions. Do you want to address any of that?
sure, I will.
Just lastly, very quickly, there's a paper, The Atlantic came out, and they asked Elon Musk why he wants to go to Mars. And he wrote something about Carl Sagan, and Carl Sagan had a book called The Pale Blue Dot. And Carl Sagan had asked NASA to make sure that Voyager took a picture of the planet as it flew. So you made me think of something I read this morning. It makes me think of the grand, even though we're isolated and the macrocosm and microcosm meet, and we are in this infinitude, that is kind of a Leibnizian world of harmony.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to answer her questions about the
I will answer when I get
also. Desiree and Sue also want to say something.
Well, so more of an observation and something that I really find fascinating, and it's been pointed out before, but when you get far enough away, you see that network, you know, the network of energy, the net, I suppose you would call it, that is so similar to our neurology, and as well as, you know, the universal thing about the roots of trees and all our blood system, all of that, how there's a network that it mimics in image and probably also in what it does universally as we get out, as well as zooming in. So again, that as above, so below.
Yeah, it looks like our brain activity.
Okay, and I don't know if you want to address the question now or first ask Sue.
I'm going to address it when I talk about common manas.
Okay, makes sense. Sue, go ahead.
So I think it was Nancy Seacrest who put this idea to me, and I've thought about it a lot for many, many years. The idea, if you go into the deep materiality, you know, into the atom nucleus and then in the quarks, or even just the idea of the most dense material, then if you get to the spirit, if it makes a loop, like if you keep going denser and denser, I'm not sure, but it seems like it's kind of the same as when we are toward the absolute, like from our discussion last hour. You were looking at still the physical, you know, universe, but then I also saw the deeper physical as then looping back somehow to the absolute. That's all. Over.
Okay. Okay, so let's go to the etheric double. And this is a kind of an experiment. Again, if we were alive, I would pair you up with each other, but to experience the etheric double. But since we can't do that, we'll try to do this. So what I want you to do is take your hands and put it, you know, about an inch apart, and try to feel any resistance as you know, as you vary your hands. See if you could feel, you know, a resistance that between the space of the hands. Well, this may take. Now I could feel any resistance from here, but so this is this is sensing the etheric double. You may need to practice it a little if you've never done it before, but and you could do this with other people. Try to sense their etheric double, or your pets, doing it with that, and you develop a sensitivity, and you notice that the etheric double varies in distance away from your body depending on your emotional state, your physical health, etc., etc. Usually when you're sick, you hold the etheric double much closer to you. Okay, so the next principle, prana, I'm going to point to an experience with breath called pranayama, and let's practice that a little bit. And the experience of the breath, while your experience of the breath, try to experience the vitality and the aliveness of it. So the practice is you take your two fingers on either side of your nose, and with your thumb, you hold your right nostril closed, and you breathe out from your left nostril, and then you breathe in from your left nostril, and then you switch fingers and close the left nostril and breathe out of the right nostril and breathe into the right nostril and alternate. So let's do that for a minute or so. So getting in touch with the breath and the prana has a number of effects on the body, but it also has an effect on the mind and the desire body. Sort of pervades all the principles. And in noticing that aspect, it sort of calms the whole and balances the whole principle. So next, I'm going to talk about sort of the combination of desire, body, and part of the mind. And this hopefully will address Adrian's comment. We've been automatically trained since maybe 2 years old to develop our mind and emotions. And you notice that they sort of go together. They're really hardly ever separated. An idea gives rise to an emotion, which further gives rise to an idea, which further gives rise to the emotion. For example, if I say the word Hitler, immediately there's memories, associated ideas around it, but immediately there's also emotions like anger and disgust and hatred, and the emotions then bring back memories that further tie into the concepts. And likewise, if I bring up the name Gandhi, it also brings up emotions, but they're more the positive emotions. And this emotional, mental way of what we focus on for most of the time, and that veils and shadows almost all the other principles, is this mind, emotion, and it's of this substance that our personality is built up. It's this substance which both the rational and the irrational behaviors are built, and it's the home of this ego that thinks and feels itself as a separate, limited, constrained individual. And it's this coloring which affects almost our entire life, and which we, in the spiritual endeavor, need to overcome, purify, modify, put it in its proper place. Never eliminate it. We don't eliminate anything. We integrate and purify. And so, in every quote experience that we're going through right now, these principles, this desire, emotional, mind principle, wants to put its 2 cents in, wants to give its view, wants to frame all the experience in terms of like and dislike, pleasure, pain, the opposites. This is the world of the opposites, is the duality that the desire mind is constantly creating and recreating. And it's such a hard endeavor that it needs to be practiced all the time, for fear that it might disappear. Now it won't disappear, but that's the fear, that it's really made out of nothing, and it's sort of creating itself by using it all the time. And so when we start meditating, it becomes very obvious how prevalent this aspect of ourself is. But eventually, as we go on and we reassure it that it's not going to completely disappear forever, if it lets go of its hold, you can start experiencing other aspects of itself, both the sensations of the physical, the vitality of the life, even experiencing the nature of the mind and the emotions instead of being overcome by them. And the major tool by which we do that is our attention, our awareness. And so that's what we're developing in this endeavor, is using more and more the awareness to highlight the full experience of our reality. Any comments or questions about that? I didn't have a particular exercise or experience because we're doing it all the time. We can't help but do it, and noticing that we're doing it is what the rest of the class is about. So any questions or comments?
Yeah. Ed, I would wonder if that is kind of the gatekeeper, that desire body, from both the higher and the lower.
Only according to itself.
Yeah.
Again,
Well, when you said it makes something out of nothing, we make something out of nothing all the time and every minute.
That's right. But it's not really, because in actuality, there's neither something nor nothing, which is a mind-blowing concept to the mind. But maybe we'll get to that.
Well, so if you're observing, you can observe from a personal space or objective space. So I guess in meditation, for instance, you're trying to get to a third position from a higher, watching yourself do these things. Right. I'm watching myself do it. You know?
Yeah, differentiate between the observer and what's observed. And the, Desiree and Adrian also wanted to add something.
I was just going to, what came to mind, of course, what came to mind while you were talking about that was, that we sense that we have so little power because our brains will just go bing, 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 like that movie where the dog goes squirrel, lose our track as soon as something's put in there. And when someone tells you, don't think of a pink elephant, whatever you do, don't think of a pink elephant. And of course, all you can do is think of a pink elephant and then struggle to erase the pink elephant. So yeah, when you talk about the mind just kind of doing its own thing without us feeling like we have a lot of control is just true.
Did you want to add something? Just that Adrian and Brigitte both want to make a comment or have a question.
Go on.
I'm sorry.
I don't want to say anything. Go on.
I like what you're saying, and this area of interest is a great interest of mine about the principle of distinction. You use the word like we need to integrate, and I wrote for myself some notes. How do we integrate slavery? How do we integrate sexism? How do we integrate classism? How do we integrate sexual abuse? And whilst we are meditating, and we are faulted, people who like to exist on the higher plane of consciousness are not folks who are getting their hands dirty. And maybe it's the people who are getting their hands dirty who are causing the problems. I don't know. But I know it's a lot of people in the political sphere that help annihilating the problems. The ones who are making use of the distinctions are some of the folks who are getting rid of the error. So how do you, I mean, my question is, it doesn't seem like we can disregard the distinctions that are being made. They cannot only be addressed by transcendental meditation, that we have to note the distinctions we're making and resolve them somehow.
So my answer is you can't solve the problem on the level of the problem. And so you need to get to another level of consciousness, which sees the whole picture. And that's what we're going to discuss next, the Buddhimanas approach to quote problems.
Okay, that's great. Brigitte, good question, Adrian. And Brigitte, go ahead before Ed continues.
Yeah, I've been visualizing this, the ego personality, what you call the desire mind. It's like looking at all of life like a matrix where we create a point. And when Ed said we're constantly afraid of its annihilation, that was very, very appropriate, because I think because we take forces out of our environments, opinions, energies, and form them into a point, something we can get a hold of so we can function with this point, the point being the personality in the world. That's why there's this fear of annihilation. And of course it does dissolve when we die. But like Ed said, if we want to change issues between all these points that we are, the best way would seem to step back to change. You know, if we step back, we can remove parts of this personality that we have created far better than if we're slugging it out in the middle of it, being at the center of it and trying to change it by being very identified with it. So I thought that was a very valuable observation. And the whole matrix idea, of course, came through in that video. That was a terrific video where it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So thank you for that, Ed. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, we're running out of time. So let me say a little bit about Buddhimanas. So Buddhimanas is the trans-rational, trans-idea state. And one of the ways we can access that is through music, because most of the time we just experience music and it doesn't necessarily excite the mind and the emotions. So certain music does. So what I want to do is I want to play you some music, and I want you to listen to it from this higher viewpoint, not from the ideas or the sensations, but try to feel your way to this higher principle. Yep. Okay. So what are people's experience with that?
Well, I am so glad you brought this up because, I mean, as you said with Adrian's question, we cannot solve a problem at the level that it was created. And we have to take the step back and try to reach this Buddhic atmosphere. And I think it can be done through music, and it can be done through reading texts, as we discussed in the last hour. Like, you could read Swedenborg or you can read Jakob Böhme, and it really touches something and it just puts things into perspective. That's the way I felt. Robert, go ahead.
So when one listens to music, it bridges the gap between the human experience and maybe the heavenly experience. And when you surrender to the music, you're not thinking. There's no thinking involved, and there's no lower emotions involved. There's higher emotions. Maybe there's joy, or there is joy. So it certainly almost takes you out of that desire, menace body into that Buddha, because you're at a different place. At least for me, I've been involved with music most of my life, and so you can actually become one with the music, and you're not in your body, you're not in your mind, you're not in your thinking, and you're not in your emotions.
Well said.
Adrian, you wanted to say something too? Yes, Robert. Well, very well said. And then Rosie after Adrian.
Ed, you're quite a diplomat, the way you answer questions. And I agree with you on music, and Carl Orff does that to me, the Carmina Burana. And when I leave the concert hall, I'm no longer there, I'm outside in traffic. So this is my question. Can you give me an example? And let's say I do agree with everything said, and I love the higher manas. Can you give me an example where stepping away from has solved a social dilemma, a social nightmare?
So there's not a general answer to specific problems. Let me just say the way I would approach it. And I approach it in the presence. In other words, if you get in touch with the total situation as much as you can and access this higher wisdom, then the creative energies start appearing both within you and the people you're working with, and you come up with a solution that no one could have anticipated. It's not even on the horizon. It's created in this atmosphere of cooperation, attention, presence. That would be my answer. You have to come up with your own answer, obviously.
Okay. I hope that helps, Adrian. Maybe we can add something later. Rosie and Veronica want to say something. Rosie, go ahead, and then Veronica.
Just quick with regard to the music illustrating Booty. And I think that was a great illustration of your point that Booty is ever present in our experience. We don't focus on it though. I mean, with Mozart, for example, I ask myself, like, how often do I actually, or many of us, actually ever sit down and listen to music? You know, if they used to do that, people would sit and listen to music, and that was the activity. But now, at least for me, most of the time I have music on in the background. Maybe when I'm, for example, trying to increase my brain power and I'm studying or I'm working on something, but it's kind of back there in the background. Whereas if, you know, you actually sat and you listened to music and that was what you were doing, it's kind of meditative, and that's becoming maybe a little bit more focused on our Buddhic nature and bringing it more to the forefront.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the attitude. I mean, it really is the attitude we approach anything, reading a text or listening to music. Very good point, Rosie. It's first Veronica and then Elma.
But
Oh,
just
sorry,
a point,
yeah, Ed. Yeah.
just a point. I hope we can go a little bit beyond 11 o'clock because I want everybody to experience Atma.
Okay, well, why don't we continue that? And then why don't we continue with the talk, and then Veronica and Elma will talk afterwards, if that's okay with everyone. That way we can finish this, and then whoever has to leave, and yes, you can come on, you can continue longer, don't worry. I can, plus anybody can get the recording. Okay, so why don't you do the last experience, and then we'll address Veronica and Elma, if that's okay.
Okay. So everyone get comfortable, and I'm going to tell you a story that's can be transformational. And I want you to just listen and imagine along with me, and as much as possible, put aside the commenting voice that we have going on all the time and just focus on the story. So let's begin. If I were to say where you were, I would say you're sitting in a chair or a bench or a couch, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce myself. I'm really a magician, and I have this magic wand. And so I'm going to touch the magic wand on your head, and you're going to float about 2 inches off your chair. And for the rest of this story, you're going to remain in that position while everything else around you will be changing. So you're a couple inches off the chair, so we don't need the chair. So with my magic wand, the chair disappears. And you're floating above the ground in your room, inside your house. And with my magic wand, I make all the furniture and the things in your room disappear. And so you're in an empty room inside. But then with my magic wand, I disappear your house. And so you're now floating above the ground outside. So you're outside. And the way you know you're outside is basically the earth is your frame of reference. And so with my magic wand, I'm disappearing the earth. The earth is no longer there. And you're floating in space. And you see the sun and the stars and the galaxies and the moon and the asteroid belt. And with my magic wand, I disappear all the stars and the galaxies and the astrobot. And there's just you and the moon and the sun. And you notice that while you're still in place, you and the moon are circling the sun. And now I'm going to use my magic wand and the sun and moon disappear. And so you're in outer space with no frame of reference whatsoever. And now I'm going to disappear your body. You no longer have a body. So there's nothing left. And yet you're still there. So let's examine who you are now. Try to find where you stop, where you begin, where you're locating, what size you are. All these things you fill, you are the only thing. And you're infinite. You're not finite. And you're located in this infinite space, but there really can't be two infinities. So you and the space are the one infinity. And so just be with this infinite self. Okay, so now I want to return everything, but I really have no place to put it. The only place there is, the only thing there is you. And so I'm going to start filling you up. So first I'm going to return the sun and the moon within you. And then I'm going to return the galaxies and the stars and the nebula and the asteroids and the planets. And they're all within you. And then I'm going to return the earth within you. And then I'm going to return your house and the walls and the objects within you. And then I'm going to return the chair within you. And lastly, I'm going to return your body within you. And with the magic wand, you slowly float down to the chair. And when you're ready, you could open your eyes. So, what do you think?
I don't want to say it was a great exercise, but I don't want to say anything. Maybe Veronica and Elma want to go ahead and say something first.
Go ahead.
Veronica? I mean, it just puts things again into perspective. And it's, Veronica, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go quickly. About that last exercise, it made me think of, very popular now to go into these tanks where, you know, they reproduce the womb experience.
And sensory
Yeah, deprivation, because then there's this powerful feeling of the I, not the ego I, you know, all that there is still there. Anyway, and then the quick comment about the previous one, you know, obviously the arts have always been the bridge, including the ancients and their rituals, to something higher, greater than ourselves. But I wanted to try to answer Adrian's question about how can we accept the suffering in the world. And if I may, I mean, I think I have two quick things to mention, because I'm working with two groups who are trying to be practical about racism and many other such ailments. And we all agree that there are two things: absolutely no denial and personal experience. And it seems that the understanding and the actions, the understanding first, and then the actions that are the result of the understanding are proportionate to the amount of suffering that one has gone through and is able to identify. If we accept our own demons, DEMONS, our own shadows, and then we observe the suffering in ourselves, external suffering, and the suffering we impose, we create of our own on ourselves, then it is infinitely much easier to see it in others and to start acting out there. And within the group that I am in, this is what's happening. We feel that it's so much easier to accept and to respond. It's not just the acceptance, but when we accept that there has been this, and there is this suffering in the world, then we can act on it. So it's a form of self-actualization, really. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Before Ed wants to say something, for those who have to leave, I will stay on, and then Elma can ask a question after Ed made his comments, and I hope you can join us next week. We have Doug Keane. He's also a national speaker of the TIAS, and he's going to talk about ethics in the age of greed, finding one's way in a morass of immorality. So anyhow, Ed, did you want to say something to Veronica before we go to Elma?
No.
Okay, good. Elma, go ahead.
Well, I have a question about the 7 principles and their relationship to each other. Is there any more or less? Because like when, I don't know, I just feel like through hearing the music and being more connected like with the Buddhi, and that is another question in terms of, does it matter which type of music? Because, you know, there's like, whatever, rap or whatever, you know, like, and there's classical and stuff, and I'm not sure if there needs to be a certain type of music, but also like when I listen to that, I can see, it's just a feeling that maybe the Buddhi, desire and body, so like are more connected to some, I don't know, for some weird reason. I feel like or it's just my feeling on what you think about it. Are there any specific principles more connected to each other than others?
So I'm not going to answer any of those questions.
Okay.
I'll let, if someone else wants to answer, that's fine. But my focus was on the experience of the principles. The ideas of the principles is a broad subject, and I think, as a matter of fact, I think Sue did a great job at her talk, talking about the principles, and but I don't want to get into the ideas of the principles too much.
Well, there's one thing I want to say about your question, Elma, is I know Betty and Rosie were at that workshop too. So Kurt Leland is a theosophist, and I actually bought the book. And the way he does it, he talks about music, and he talks about the 7 chakras, and then he describes for each chakra a different music. So definitely, if you want to get up to the higher chakras, or to the Atma and Buddhic level, you definitely have to listen to different kind of music than when you want to work on your 1st and 2nd chakra. So I hope that helps to a certain degree. Definitely makes a difference which music you listen to. So I teach yoga, and I created the playlist based on these teachings because it made sense to me, and I tried to reach the heart chakra and the 6th chakra, and it's mainly classical music. Anyhow, Desiree, go ahead.
Yeah, what you just said is very similar to what I was going to say about the exercise. Is as an experience, while I was listening, I was going to bring up the fact that I could feel it in different areas of my body, and associating that with different chakras. And so the higher frequency notes, I felt more energy up here. And the lower frequency notes, or when it went down, I felt it lower in my body. And so I had that sense of different chakras, being activated or responding to the different frequencies and sounds, or even emotions or feelings within the notes. So I would agree with you that, and Elmar, you might want to just look up frequencies and chakras, because there is some, correlation between different frequencies, different levels, and activating different things. So I felt it that way, and I thought that was a great exercise. Also, kudos on that exercise of Zoom, that you did with the guided meditation. I'm going to definitely use that. I loved it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Desiree. That's what I was thinking too. As you were doing it, I thought, well, I'm glad I have a recording, and I actually can probably send the audio recording of this lecture too, because it is an awesome meditation, and puts, it just helps with the principles. And yes, Elma, definitely, maybe you can feel the connection. I think that's good. Anybody else? Well, Ed, first of all, thank you. I loved it. I loved experiencing these 7 principles of men. Julia would have been so thrilled to be in this lecture, because that was so important to her. And I think you did a wonderful way of making it really understand and stick, that it becomes, that you don't forget anymore that we have these physical body, etheric, that we have a desire body, a mind body, and that by reading lectures, by listening to the right music, by being with the people who are on that same frequency or vibration, that can help us to reach a higher level, to the higher manas, to strengthen that antakarana. Veronica, and then if Ed has any final words. Veronica?
Oh, I just want to say a big thank you to Ed, because it's very, very creative. I would say artistically creative, and it's a lot of work to put it together. But I really enjoyed the aesthetics in the presentation and all the rest of it, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We are so grateful to have you here. Ed, some final words?
Yeah, just that my main focus more and more has shifted from the mental, the idea, to the experiential. That we're just touching the beginnings of this, the full experience of who we are and what our life is and what reality is. And I encourage everybody on their journey, on their individual journey. So thank you all for your attention.
Well, thank you for taking your time preparing this. It was awesome. And thank you for everybody who joined us, and I hope to see you next week.